Good evening from Central Pennsylvania, and welcome to another Provident webinar. I'm your host, Ed Mann, Director of Training and Education for Provident. I want to welcome any new listeners to our first webinar of 2026, and welcome back our returning listeners. I hope all of you had a happy and safe holiday season and wish you the best for the new year. I decided that since January has been designated as National Fire Service Organizations for Firefighter Cancer Awareness Month, that I thought it'd be a good idea to finish this month with a webinar on that very subject. While I believe it's a topic we should be paying attention to every day, it never hurts to take some time to drill down on the subject and give it some special attention. And for our listeners, I just want you to know a little bit about myself. I retired from the Air Force as a firefighter. I worked as a Pennsylvania State Fire Commissioner for 14 and a half years. I retired as a volunteer fire chief at the end of 2021 and went to work for Provident. It'll be 11 years come February. So I do have some fire service background. If you're wondering why I have a goatee, I don't wear breathing apparatus anymore. So that's why the facial hair is there. I've been clean most of my adult life, so I decided to go a little dirty, if you will. I also want to dedicate this evening's program to those firefighters who've died from occupational cancer and those who've survived or battled with cancer. Let's not forget the families who've had to deal with this terrible disease too. Let's not forget the scientific research and medical community that has done and continues to do their work on behalf of the fire service and our families. A tip of the hat to the National Volunteer Fire Council, the International Association of Firefighters, the International Association of Fire Chiefs, the First Responder Center for Excellence, and the Firefighter Cancer Support Network, and other national organizations that continue to provide education, training, and advocacy on our behalf. I'm especially grateful to have John Pivadori, Deputy Director of Indiana County Emergency Management, that's here in Pennsylvania, join us this evening to share his story with us, and he'll join us in a few moments. I'm hopeful his message will resonate with you and cause you to take action to reduce your cancer risk. So we'll go through the proverbial slides about what Provident is. We got started in 1902 as an independent insurance agency. 1928, we began serving volunteer fire departments with customized blanket and accident health insurance. Today, we provide insurance policies to volunteer combination career fire departments and emergency responders with a multitude of programs. We also now offer insurance programs to our partners in law enforcement. We're in our 7th year now as being one of the best places to work in Pennsylvania. Some of our programs, our accident and health program, one of the keys if you're an accident health client of ours is if you have access to our first responder assistance program. We also offer a 24-hour accidental death and dismemberment policy, group term life policies, critical illness and cancer, which covers cancer, heart attack, stroke, and renal failure. And oh, by the way, under our accident health policy, I believe we have about 26 states now where we can answer or offer an optional cancer rider to our accident health policy. And then, of course, our Fire Plus property and casualty insurance. And if you're a Fire Plus property and casualty client, you have access to our Fire Plus online training academy with over 800 courses. So if you want to scan this QR code, believe it or not, at 66 and going on 67, I'm still able to use some technology. If you scan this QR code, it'll give you access to the entire program that we're going to cover tonight. And at the end of the program, you'll have a chance to scan it again. And I have a lot of QR codes with links in them at the end of the program as well. So, John, if you want to turn your camera on and so, John, introduce yourself to our listeners and give them your cancer story, if you will. You're muted, John.
Hello, everyone.
There you
My
go.
name's John Pivadori. I began my career um, on July 15th, 1989, in Blairsville, and that's in Western Pennsylvania. We ran an engine company, rescue company, and water rescue company. Um, After probably 20 years of that, I got interested in more of the more technical rescue and joined Indiana County's Team 900, which is a technical rescue and hazmat team. Um, Following all that brings us to today. So I've been around the block, just about any kind of ick you can think of, I've been part of. Um, and my story starts in 2022. I was having issues up all night. Well, not all night, but throughout the night going to the bathroom. I had a lot of pressure, um, incomplete voiding of the bladder, and things like that. From that point, I went to my primary care physician, and they weren't too concerned, but I felt that it was more concerning. So I took it the next step, and that fall, I went to a urologist. And quite frankly, the urologist is the one who made the difference in my life. Not only did he do an investigation on the bladder, but he also wasn't happy just listening to me. So he sent me to a surgeon in Pittsburgh to have other scans done. And that summer is when I found out that I had bladder cancer, and I also had renal cancer in my right kidney. Um, as far as the bladder cancer, the treatment was relatively straightforward. They and put a liquid into your bladder that you had to hold for an hour, and they did that once a week for 7 weeks. As we progressed through that, we moved into going to the surgeon at UPMC in Pittsburgh. He decided to do an orthoscopic surgery to try to get the tumor off of the kidney. He felt that he was successful. Um, However, he wouldn't tell me, he wouldn't promise me they had clean margins. So fast forward, and this whole time I'm doing scans every quarter, doing blood work all the time. He wanted to hold off on treatments because he didn't want to ruin anything that was good. So we waited until 23. In 23, we went back. They went back in and checked the bladder. They determined that it was still good, no problems. Um, and then we went back to life as normal. Starting in 24, the scan came back of my renal area that the cancer had returned, followed by subsequent scans and other things that went on during 24. And then we got into 2025. That's when it was decided that he was going to go back in because he waited because the progression of the cancer was very slow. And this past summer in 25, he started orthoscopic, but it didn't end well. So he was not happy with what he was seeing. So they ended up opening me up and going conventional surgery on me, which laid me up for 7 weeks. And to add insult to injury, just before I was supposed to come back to work, I ended up with blood clots in my leg. Um, so at that point, the surgeon wanted me to go for immunotherapy. So I met with the oncologist in Pittsburgh, and they developed a plan. It was going to be a half-hour IV of Keytruda every third week. And since there is an UPMC affiliate here in Indiana, Pennsylvania, I could do the treatments here. They decided, as that went on, before they actually started, they wanted to do another scan. And that's when they discovered that I was stage 4 cancer. It had moved in numerous other areas. And this is the part of the story that I have to tell you. I pray that you all have a support network. With my wife and my daughter and my grandson and the family and the brotherhood we all share with one another. That's huge, because I don't care how tough you are. When you hear those words, um, it'll tear you down. The other part of that is, again, being comfortable with your doctors. It is so important. If you're not feeling it right, go somewhere else. Get a second, a third opinion. Um, it it I can't explain how infuriating it is at times, getting told certain things that you just don't believe, and you have to go find out for yourself. But please make that an extra effort. And then the only final thing I'll say is I am truly blessed as a county employee that we have very good health care. But Ed had me go back through my list of everything that I had been through. And I started adding up costs of office visits, cost of gas, and everything for everywhere I went. It's a significant number. So it may be a good thing to start a nest egg or an insurance policy or whatever you feel is necessary for you, to make sure that your family is taken care of. And we come to today. I had my 6-month bladder check at 11 o'clock this morning, and I was told that they found spots on my bladder again. So now I have to go back in for them to do biopsies. So never take it for granted the life you have. Ed, is there any?
So John, I want to back up. You made the statement you went to your primary care doctor and you weren't getting answers and you decided to go to a urologist. So I think the important message there is you have to be willing to be your own advocate. Would you agree?
Definitely.
Look, ladies and gentlemen, I know it's difficult for us lay people to want to argue with a doctor. We didn't go to medical school. But you know your health. You know what's right. You know when you're feeling well. You know when things aren't right. Don't be afraid to push back and be your own advocate, because from what I'm listening to John here, had he just taken the word of his primary care physician and not pushed the issue with a urologist, heaven knows how long the cancer would have went before anybody recognized it. And, early detection is very important when it comes to cancer survival. Folks, John's going to stick around with us. He's probably going to turn his camera off. And I'm going to start with the presentation, but as we go through, we'll try to answer questions as we go through the program or at the end of it. And like we always do. So I'm going to start sharing my screen here and we'll get started with tonight's presentation. So you're more than welcome. Again, you can scan this QR code. That's, I'm assuming, Sam, do I have the right screen up? I can't tell with the colors.
Yeah, you do.
Okay. You can scan this and it'll give you the entire program that we're going to cover tonight. There will be links at the end of this with QR codes as well to any of the videos that are in the program. So we're going to talk about cancer risk reduction. And so this is kind of like in three phases, if you will. I'm going to talk about the reasons why we should be protecting ourselves. I'm going to talk about the things you can do to reduce your risk. Then I'm going to talk about some things that you can do if you're diagnosed with cancer. Now, the program itself is titled Good, Better, Best. One of the ways to look at this program is, especially when it comes to doing things to reduce your risk, are things that you can do inexpensively and sometimes on your own, things that'll cost a little more money for yourself and perhaps your fire department, and then those things that might cost quite a bit of money. And this all kind of came about because I attended a national program several years ago. And while we were in the program, everybody was talking about that everybody should be doing all of these things that I'm going to cover. And I finally raised my hand and said, do you realize that if a fire department tried to do all of these things, we have a lot of fire departments in our country that can't afford to do those things. And perhaps we should be looking at good practices, better practices, and best practices, kind of based on how easy it is to do and how expensive it might be. So the first part of this program this evening is we're going to talk about why we should be paying attention to reducing our risk. And I also want to make it clear to everybody, I was no angel back in the day when it come to wearing breathing apparatus and doing all the things you should do to protect yourself. So I'm not on any kind of high horse about that. But I want you to also keep in mind, we didn't know a lot of the things that the scientific and the research community has pointed out to us in the last 10 years. So really, there's no excuse today. Then we didn't know what we didn't know. Now we know, and we ought to be taking the steps to reduce our risk. So you have a 9% higher risk of being diagnosed with cancer than the general population if you're a firefighter. A 14% higher risk of dying from cancer than a general population. And this is based on studies that were done in 2010. This is 2026, folks. So the studies have been around a while. Cancers most responsible for the higher risk respiratory, lung cancers, mesothelioma, GI cancers, esophageal cancer, large intestine cancer, kidney cancer. Additional risk for firefighters. Testicular cancer is 2.0 times greater for a firefighter than it is an individual in the general population. Some recent studies have even pointed out that breast cancer among women in our business is greater for women in our business than it is women who aren't in our business. Prostate cancer, 1.28 times higher for a firefighter than it is for somebody in the general population. So what's changed? Well, I know when I started, we didn't have a lot of plastics and polymers in houses. Today, they're everywhere. When I started in the business in the 70s, we had 30 minutes a lot of times where you had to worry about something flashing over. Now the scientific community and real world experience tells us that a flashover can occur in 5 minutes. And all the chemicals that we're exposed to through the toxic combustion, the byproducts of things that are burning. And I'll point some of them out here in some other slides. So the synthetics, the polymers, the foams, the plastics, the resins, even those chemicals that the fire service pushed for over the years to be used as flame retardants are causing cancer in humans when they burn. So as this loads, what I want you to think about is that some of these chemicals that appear here, some of these names that appear on this slide, you're going to find prevalent at nearly every fire. We'll say room and contents fire you go to. Carbon monoxide. You get into an older home, you'll probably find airborne asbestos as you're tearing stuff apart. Newer construction, if there's OSB board in it, you're going to be exposed to formaldehyde. Carbon dioxide. The point is that obviously not all of these are at every fire you go to. Some of these are going to be at nearly every, say, room and contents fire, but it's quite possible some of these others are going to be in the atmosphere. And how do we know it? Because the scientific community, the research community, has gathered smoke from stuff that they've been burning and analyzed it. So these things are real. Now, someone will say to you, well, and we'll get into that here in another slide. So what I want you to think about is when you look at the slide, here's the size of a human hair. The red dot represents, the blue dot represents a dust pollen, dust that's in the air, and the red dots represent, quite honestly, what could be found from the previous slide. Just to give you an idea how small the microns are of the combustion particles of organic compounds, the metals that we're exposed to. So this, again, the scientific community has shown us that arsenic causes kidney, liver, and prostate cancer. Asbestos causes lung and mesothelioma. Benzene, multiple myeloma and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Diesel exhaust, lung, bladder, and esophageal cancer. Formaldehyde. Just to give you an idea, so some of those things in that previous slide, they're able to determine that they definitely cause cancer in humans. And this came from the International Agency for the Research on Cancer Studies. So other studies have been done. Dr. Grace Lemasters took and looked at 32 different studies and put a meta-analysis together. Firefighters are exposed to many different carcinogens. Benzene, diesel exhaust, chloroform, soot, styrene, formaldehyde are the leaders. Many of these chemicals are inhaled. And you're saying, wait a minute, inhaled? Why, where are my breathing apparatus? So I'm going to get on a soapbox for a minute. We know from what the scientific community is telling us that this stuff causes cancer. Yet I continue to see pictures and videotapes and fires I've witnessed recently on my own where firefighters go to the trouble of putting an air pack on their back, but don't bother putting a face piece on their face. Again, I wasn't an all-star when it came to wearing my face piece back in the day, but I didn't know then what I know now. More importantly, some of this stuff is being absorbed, and you're saying, how could we absorb this stuff into our bloodstream through our skin with all those layers of protective clothing? I'll show you some slides here in a little bit to drive that point home. The soot that's left behind from stuff that's burning contains polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs, and many of those are known to cause cancer in humans. Soot's a group 1 carcinogen and a top cancer-causing agent. It gets sucked into the body through the skin on their faces, hands, and under their gear. And again, I'm going to show you some slides here shortly to kind of prove that point. So when they looked at skin permeability, the area of your groin is 300 times more permeable than the arch of your foot. So there was a study done where the IAFF funded this study in January of 2015. They took a firefighter, they wiped them down with clean wipes, and then they put them in a rather large cage and they filled it with this aerosol. So this is what the individual looked like before he went into that container. And he spent time in that container doing exercises like you would if you were actually like he was pulling ceilings, doing rescues, crawling on his hands and knees, so on and so forth. These are some of the slides after the fact. So right in this area here where your boot and pant legs come together, look at the material that's on his skin. The next slide is really telling. So this individual had a flash hood on, an SCBA mask on, collar turned up, and ear flaps down, and you can see what would be soot gathered on the skin. So even though we're wearing all our gear, we're still getting this material onto our skin. And when I talk about some of the things you can do to help reduce your risk, I'll give you some things that you can do to get this stuff off your skin. Here's a photograph that a firefighter by the name of Sean Hogan sent in 2016. This t-shirt was under his station uniform shirt and under his turnout gear. And this is what his t-shirt looked like. What do you think his skin under that t-shirt looked like? It wasn't a huge fire, but it was very smoky from all the plastics and whatever else was burning. This is what a t-shirt looked like under a Class B dress uniform and a turnout coat. So you can imagine what may have been on his skin that you couldn't even see. So keep this in mind. For every 5 degrees your skin temperature increases, the amount of absorption through your skin increases 400%. So let's think about this for a minute. And I'm going to use central Pennsylvania as an example. Now, it might not be so bad right now since it's only 5 degrees out. It's July. We're having one of those 95-degree days in Pennsylvania. The humidity is about 70, 80%. And if you're a volunteer, you're at home cutting the grass. If you're a career firefighter, you're at the firehouse cutting the grass. The station bells go off or your pager goes off and you make a mad dash for the apparatus. So you're already overheated from the heat and the humidity. Your skin pores are wide open because you're sweating. You put your turnout gear on and you climb onto the rig. You have a 5-minute travel time to the call. The air conditioner isn't going to work instantly in that apparatus. So now I'm adding that gear on top of my body that's already overheated. I get to the fire, and the fire's on the 3rd floor of a ordinary residential structure. The incident commander orders your crew to take a line to the 3rd floor. So now you go up, you extinguish the fire. So now you're exposed to, you're doing the extra work. So the exertion, you're sweating more. You get to the 3rd floor where the fire is, you're exposed to the heat of the fire, which means I'm heating you up some more. And now you go outside. Now, I don't know about you, but I never cooled off right away when I got outside. I continued to sweat even more and could feel my body temperature even getting higher. So the entire time that whole thing's going on, I'm absorbing more and more of whatever crap was in the atmosphere directly into my bloodstream through my skin. Now, there's no test on this, and you don't have to memorize this, but a definition of a volatile organic compound. They're released from burning fuel such as gasoline, wood, coal, or natural gas. They're emitted from oil and gas fields and diesel exhaust. Anybody on here ever been exposed to diesel exhaust? They're released from solvents such as paints, glues, and other products that are used and stored at home and at work. How many of you use spray paint or varnishes at work to clean your tools? Examples of the compounds: gasoline, benzene, formaldehyde. Solvents such as toluene and xylene styrene, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce that one. The main solvent used in dry cleaning. The health effects. We know, because the scientific community has said, these things cause cancer in humans when you're exposed to it. Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs, are a group of more than 100 different chemicals that are released from burning coal, oil, gasoline, trash, tobacco, wood, and other organic substances, such as charbroiled meat. Now you're saying, okay, Ed, now you're telling me I can't eat steak on a grill anymore. No, I'm not telling you that. I'm not giving up my steak. Of more than 100 forms of PAHs, 15 are listed as reasonably anticipated to cause cancer in humans. Again, the scientific community is telling us this. So some additional studies from actual fires. So they actually did 14 fires, room and contents fires. Fires were allowed to go to flashover. And they wiped everybody down with cleansing wipes prior to entering the buildings. Everybody rotated through different assignments like outside vent, interior attack, search and rescue. And then they took measurements of skin, things they found on skin after these evolutions were over. And here's some of the results. PAHs were detected more frequently on the hands than on the neck. Those completing interior attack, the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons were 4 times higher on the hands than levels on the neck. Cleansing wipes, and we'll talk about that a little later, reduced the PAH levels on the neck by 54%. Those doing outside vent work, detectable PAH levels on the neck were found on 58% of the firefighters. So 3 times levels found on your hands. So why would you find higher levels on somebody's neck doing outside vent work? Very good possibility because they didn't have collars up. They didn't have their flash hoods on because I'm doing outside work. Those completing search and rescue were found to have significantly higher exposure to those completing interior attack. Again, the closer I am to the fire, the cleaner things are burning. If I'm doing search further away from the fire, I'm working more in smoke than I am anything else. So does it work? Well, results from some of the studies: contamination by doing preliminary exposure, and I'm going to get into all these in other slides. Contamination was reduced by using a wet soap and brush by 85%. If you use a dry brush, you reduce it by 23%. They even went as far as taking backpack blowers and just doing and blowing turnout gear off. And as you can see, it didn't do much to reduce the contamination. So here's a video I'm going to show you from the University of Miami, the Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center. The doctor that does the narrative here is Alberto, and he actually represented the United States at the International Agency in Research for Cancer when they moved firefighting to a class 1 category for cancer in humans. So let's watch the video.
So this is super invisible powder that's used actually for theft detection and cash. But one of the things we're trying to simulate is pretending that this is black soot, just the same type of soot that comes off combustible or burning materials you would encounter in a fire incident response.
What happened?
The initiative actually came to us from the Palm Beach County Fire Rescue Department. They were very interested in understanding about how what they did for work was impacting their health, specifically how maybe being a firefighter or an EMS responder may increase their risk for cancer. One of the things we were trying to do today is figure out, is there a way we can demonstrate how maybe cancerous materials are transferred from a fire incident response back to the fire station and personal vehicle. And so today was really a teaching exercise and a scientific exercise of trying to see how we demonstrate where soot, represented by this invisible dye, might be transferring from when they go to respond to a fire and come back to the fire station. So the goal today was trying to be able to identify, can we feasibly show how soot is transferred from a fire incident response back to their truck and back to the fire station. As you start going through the different scenarios of post decon into the fire engine, back into the bunk, into the restrooms, back here to the coffee table, it starts becoming less visible to the naked eye. But that powder that is invisible over chronic exposure could be potentially causing cellular changes that we just don't know about yet. And hopefully, through some of our studies, we can start identifying those changes. Was really an eye-opening experience for us because I anticipated, some demonstration of how much dye would transfer. I didn't realize the breadth and scope of how much dye would spread within the different scenarios that we were shooting in, as well as continue to transfer on after the first fire engine truck. So for me, it was very impressive to see even some of the invisible dye transfer onto the bunks where they're sleeping at night. Even if it's a smaller quantity, you could imagine that low dose chronic exposure of this dye might be potentially increasing the risk over time. We filmed today in the EMS's personal vehicle, you could easily see even fainter wisps of plume of dye on the ceiling as well as on the seat that were not direct contacts, but were physically visible on this, suggesting that the particulate moves around. So you might not visibly see soot, and in this case, we got to see a dye, but that could potentially be increasing your cancer risk. The firefighter works as a fomite and is transferring, carcinogen from where their place of work back to their personal home. So we had an opportunity to have a child with us today to be able to demonstrate maybe what happens in passing some of that soap using a soccer ball. So we were able to have a child play with one of the EMS firefighters with that soccer ball, and we were able to see a second degree transfer of this invisible dye, i.e., the soot, transfer from the EMS to the soccer ball and to the child. One of the activities that I hope arises from this video that we're producing is that firefighters are a little bit more cognizant about how hygiene is a very important aspect, and decontamination is an important aspect of post-incident fire response because it makes them a little bit more aware of not only of the soot that they bring back into the fire station, but also what they might be taking to their personal homes and sharing with their families through secondary and tertiary contact of this soot on their own person. And I hope that the firefighters see that as a way of creating an opportunity for awareness and discussion of how we improve, hygiene and decontamination within the fire service.
Sam, can you hear me? I lost the controls on the bottom of my.
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. So a couple of things I want to point out in the video, and I don't want to belabor the point, but when I think back to my days as a volunteer firefighter and even a career firefighter, where I would go to a fire in the middle of the night, might be a room and contents fire, it might be something even worse. Come home, wash my hands, maybe brush my teeth at 3 o'clock in the morning, and realize I had to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go to work, and crawl back into bed and take off the clothes I wore to the fire and lay them at the foot of the bed on top of the Afghan rack we had. That's where they always went. And crawled back into bed and put my cold hands or feet up against my wife to let her know I was home and I didn't take a shower. Or the times that I came home from a call and washed my hands maybe, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and sat down on the lazy boy to watch the Steelers hopefully win a ball game, and my kids were sitting on my lap. Or the times when I was doing weekend structural burns, and I would bring get done and throw the turnout gear in the trunk of my car, my little Ford Escort hatchback, and I might take it out and let it air out or dry off, but then throw it back in it. So Monday morning when I get up to go to work and open the door, I got that smell of that smoke. The same damn car my wife would take to the grocery store and set groceries in the back of the hatchback to bring home. I didn't know any better then. I didn't know any better then. And I'm hoping through you listening to this program tonight that you'll take some steps to reduce the contamination and the cross contamination with yourselves and your family and your loved ones and the people you work with. So another video, the state of Washington, their Department of Labor and Industry funded a project. It's called Healthy In and Healthy Out. There will be a link at the end of the program where you have access to everything that's in their Healthy In, Healthy Out program. This kind of makes the point that when government, in this case, Washington State, got behind the firefighters in a partnership with the IAFF in Washington State of the things you can do.
The big thing for me now that I've had cancer for a while, I realized that, life's precious. And all of us see it every day in the service where somebody's in a fire, like auto accident, medical. People, pass away every day.
This is what firefighters do. You respond to all sorts of emergencies. You help people in their darkest hour, at their time of greatest need. You fight tooth and nail to save lives, protect property, and stabilize incidents. But as you respond to alarms, you run across some pretty dangerous situations. When it comes to fires, you train obsessively to mitigate the obvious hazards. But it's sometimes easy to forget the big danger that lurks everywhere, at every fire, big or small. Carcinogens. These chemicals and particulates are everywhere at a fire incident, and firefighters are exposed to them at every stage of response, suppression, and overhaul. It is impossible to completely eliminate the threat, but there are actions you can take to minimize the risks to your families, your coworkers, and to yourselves. That's what this video is about. Changing how firefighters operate on the fire ground so you can all live long, cancer-free lives.
As a new recruit, as a new guy that's been hired, you've got a 30-year career. Man, make it that 30 years. That's the best. That'll be the best time you've had in your life. And I would also, on the flip side, and this is even more important for those guys my age that are going to retire. I mean, you've put in 30 years. Do 30 more healthy.
So, what are these best practices? Well, they're simple, cost-effective procedures all firefighters can do to minimize exposure to carcinogens and long-term cancer risk. Let's start with the easiest and most foolproof. Limit your exposure to the diesel exhaust that comes out of the fire apparatus. This means shutting down rigs when not in use and using exhaust ventilation systems whenever possible. Another simple step towards your healthy future is to wear full PPE and SCBA while fighting fire. Whether it's a structure fire, car fire, or dumpster fire, you need to stay protected from initial attack through overhaul. What about when you come out of a fire? When it comes to carcinogen exposure, this is one of the most potentially dangerous times. As time allows, the pump operator should set up a wet or dry decontamination station, depending on the weather. Proper decon starts with removing all of the debris and contaminants while still on air. If it's below freezing, remove those carcinogenic byproducts with a dry brush. Particulates will still be airborne, and you need to leave the decon area before doffing your gear. On warmer days, a thorough spray down from a designated decon hose line stretched from the attack engine is the best method. Decon each other. Don't expose the pump operator to the contaminants. Stay connected to your SCBA, breathing air until you've completed decon. Once you've given your all, it's time to rehydrate and enter rehab. Don't just walk straight into the rehab area. Take the time to wash your hands, face, and neck with soap and water. Retrofitting an engine with a warm water outlet utilizing the heat exchanger is a realistic method of providing effective hand washing at every emergency scene. If that's not available, disposable wet wipes will do the trick. Why would you risk ingesting, inhaling, or absorbing the very chemicals and particulates you've worked so hard to avoid?
Initially, I was like, I know, wear your air pack. I get it, wear it through overhaul. I get it. But he actually talked about a whole different side of exposure, and it was the skin absorption piece, getting exposed through the skin, and how dirty gear and a dirty helmet and not showering after fires, how that's just prolonging the exposure. So after that class, I washed my gear, cleaned my helmet, and changed my ways completely.
Once the fire is out, wait until the structure is cooled before beginning overhaul procedures. Always wear your full PPE and SCBA during overhaul. When you've been cleared from the scene, take the time to bag up your contaminated equipment and PPE. Make sure the bag is sealed and placed in a compartment that's separate from where the important cargo is, you and your fellow firefighters. Similarly, SCBAs should be kept separate until they can be thoroughly cleaned. Once you're back in quarters, your turnout gear can be washed in an extractor or sent off to a professional cleaning service. Masks should be carefully washed and decontaminated in a manner consistent with the manufacturer's instructions. Helmets should also be thoroughly cleaned to remove all carcinogens and contaminants. Gloves must be washed and dried before being put back in service. These are just a few of the small, simple changes that can lead to a long and successful fire service career, uninterrupted by cancer or other illness. The job of firefighting is dangerous enough, so help each other out to use these best practices and minimize risk of carcinogen exposure so all firefighters can be healthy in, healthy out.
So a couple of things about the video, and I know with the cold spell, a lot of us are experiencing right now, it wouldn't be very practical, and you'd probably have a riot on your hands if you told your firefighters you wanted to line up when it's 5 degrees outside to do a wet decon. So, there are workarounds. Perhaps you can't do the wet decon. Maybe you take all the gear off before you get back on the rig and put it in plastic bags, and it gets put in the bed of a pickup truck to go back to the station. If you can't do that and you got to wear the gear and it's nasty and you get back in the cab of the fire truck, when you get back to the station, you're going to have to decontaminate the inside of the cab as well. There really aren't any excuses for not doing something to reduce our risk. Look, folks, I know we will never completely eliminate the risk. The only way we'll ever completely eliminate it is not to go to fires. And I know there are probably some people on here tonight who've been around a long time that are saying, well, I've been doing this for 25 or 30 years and I don't have cancer. So, I must be okay. So I want to make a couple of points here. On September the 11th and the weeks that followed that, there were a lot of people in our country that worked the rubble piles in New York. And a large number of those people developed some very rare forms of cancer. But there's an equal number of those people who have yet to develop any cancers. And I don't know the scientific or the medical reasons behind all that, and I wouldn't wager a guess. And I'm sure there are some of you who know people that have never smoked a cigarette in their life, but have developed lung cancer. Or the individual that smoked 2 packs a day and never developed lung cancer. So you have an opportunity to learn from some of this stuff tonight to reduce your risk. Maybe your own department can't afford to do some of these things, but there are some of these things you can do on your own and be accountable for yourself. So let's move on. So we're going to talk about good, better, best practices. Doing something is far better than what the alternative is, which could either having to suffer with the effects of cancer or worse yet, dying from cancer. I understand there's possible obstacles to this. Cost can be a factor. I know that there are fire departments in our country that have a difficult time paying their electric bill from month to month. I understand that. But there are some inexpensive, easy things you can do that won't cost a lot of money. You may not have enough staff in your department to do some of these things. You may have to depend on mutual aid. I remember talking to a firefighter from Texas several years ago that after the initial attack crew made the attack on the fire, they were relieved by mutual aid companies to do overhaul, and they were released from the scene to go back to the station and start cleaning themselves and their equipment. The layout or design of your building as it exists may be an issue. Without spending thousands upon thousands of dollars, there's not much you can change. Changes in attitudes will be needed. And I'm talking about attitudes from the firefighter to the fire chief and the company level officers and everybody in between. It'll take leadership at all levels to be able to accomplish some of these. So a good practice. Wear all your PPE throughout the incident, including your SCBA, even during salvage and overhaul. I've had some people tell me, hey, look, we take our 3-gas meter and run it through the house after a call. If it doesn't alert on everything, we can let the guys take their breathing apparatus off. Well, you remember the one slide I showed you earlier with all the things that could potentially be there within that soot? If you don't have the right meter, you're not detecting those things. So you really have no idea what might be in that atmosphere. Provide a second hood. So when people return from a call, they can put on a clean hood. At one time in my department, when I was a chief, we had clean hoods. We used to keep them locked up. And when you come back from a call, if your hood was a mess, we would give you another hood. We eventually just put them in a tote in the clean room, and you helped yourself to a clean hood, and the dirty ones got put into a bin so they could be washed later. My own son, when we started the second hood thing, argued with me saying, my hood's not dirty. Now I had a black hood. So I made a bet with him. Take your hood off, put it in a 5-gallon bucket, and soak it in water for 24 hours. And if you'll drink the water from the bucket after that, I won't say another word about a second hood. So he soaked his hood in a 5-gallon bucket of water overnight. And needless to say, he wouldn't drink the water the next day. I never got another argument about him swapping hoods. Use wipes on your neck, jaws, arms, and hands. Baby wipes. Stay away from alcohol-based wipes because they have a tendency to open the pores in your skin. You can buy baby wipes that are pretty good size. You don't have to buy the little ones. You can buy the big fancy firefighter wipes if you want to. But wipes, if you don't have the warm water heat exchanger on an apparatus, the wipes will do to help reduce those contaminations in those areas. Gross scene decontamination, or what they want you to refer to as preliminary exposure reduction. You saw a video from Washington State. You don't want high pressure. You just need a mist of water to wipe the stuff off. If you have some Dawn dish soap, and I'll show you some decon kits here in a little bit, some Dawn dish soap and a scrub brush and a couple of nozzles and a short section of garden hose, you can do quite a bit. Again, it's all going to be weather dependent. I understand that. Don't carry contaminated PPE in your car or inside the cab unless you have it in a bag that keeps all that off gassing inside that bag. Change your clothes as soon as possible and wash as soon as possible. Some people will argue, well, when we get back to the station, the first thing we're going to do is clean all our tools and stuff. I would argue clean yourself first. Put on some other clothes. Get out of the dirty clothes you were wearing as soon as possible. I know some firefighters now, especially in volunteer houses, keep extra clothes at the station. And when they get back, they get a shower, they put the clean clothes on, they leave their contaminated stuff at the fire station. They don't even take it home. A good rule is try to take a shower within the hour after the exposure. Clean tools and apparatus, especially after exposures. One of the things we started to do at my former firehouse when I was still the chief was all the hand tools, the SCBA, when weather permitted, all the turnout gear, all that stuff went into the bed of a pickup truck. And it got brought back to the station. So the only things that were in the cab that were contaminated were the firefighters themselves. You can work those things out. Now, I will tell you, if you're going to have people take their turnout gear off at the scene and you're going to bag it, and the reason you bag it is if you took 10 firefighters and told them to stand at the bed of a pickup truck and take their gear off and willy-nilly throw it into the bed of the pickup truck, you'd have no idea what belonged to who afterwards. Put it in a garbage bag. Make sure it's a clear garbage bag so it's not mistaken as trash and gets thrown away. But all the contaminated tools and equipment and gear get put into the bed of a pickup, brought back to the station to be clean rather than being put back onto the rig dirty and causing that cross-contamination to the rig itself. Limit your exposure to diesel exhaust. Nothing agitates me more than to walk into a firehouse and see that they went to the expense, maybe with or without grant money, and put in an exhaust capture system, and then they don't use the damn thing. Makes no sense to me. Develop and implement and enforce an SOP. It doesn't do you any good to go to the trouble to develop and say we're going to implement an SOP, a standard operating practice, if you're not going to enforce it. Wash your PPE, including hoods, gloves, and boots. I did this program a couple of weeks ago, and I had an individual who's a cancer survivor tell me that he was on vacation and there happened to be a group of dermatology doctors there. And the doctor walked by him and he had flip-flops on, and the doctor walked by him and said, "Hey, you have a big split in your toenail. You should go get that checked. It could be cancerous." So when he got back off of vacation, he went to the doctor. They sent him off for scans, and lo and behold, he had no trouble with his toes, but he had a little spot on his forehead just below his hairline that was cancerous. And this is a guy that had been in the fire service 30, 35 years who never washed the inside of his helmet. And until several years ago, when I became aware of a lot of these things, I'll be honest with you, I never scrubbed the inside of my helmet either. Just another little trick. Get an annual physical. early detection is the best thing and the best way to be able to defeat cancer and to be able to survive cancer is with an annual physical. And look, if you're not feeling well, you know when you don't feel well. There's a website you can find called Detect Together. And if you go to their website and check things out, they'll give you some tips. But if you're not feeling well and it goes on for more than a few days or a week, go see a doctor. Make sure your doctor knows you're a firefighter, whether you're a volunteer or a career firefighter. Make sure your doctor knows you're a firefighter. And at the end of the program, there's a QR code that you can scan that you'll be able to take a checklist with you to give to your primary care doctor that was developed by doctors on some additional screenings that should be done when your physician knows you're a firefighter, volunteer or career. Listen to me. When I first took that checklist to my primary care doctor, she had no idea. I had some issues here a couple of years ago, had to see a urologist. I showed him that checklist. He had no idea that firefighters were at greater risk. When I finally got into the VA medical community, I asked my primary care doctor for a low-dose CT scan. He refused it. I spent 40 minutes on the phone with the environmental health doctor at the VA, and she ordered a low-dose CT scan. Guess what? They found nodules on my thyroid, a spot on my lung, and a dilation on my aorta from a simple low-dose CT scan of the chest. Quit using tobacco. Look, this is a difficult one. I'm not going to lie to you. I smoked for a long time. I quit about 33 years ago. I do have the occasional cigar. I've tried to quit dipping Copenhagen several times through acupuncture, hypnosis, talking to a counselor, and it's been very difficult. And to be quite honest with you, I have not quit dipping snuff yet. I know what the potential problem is. I know what it can create for me. I'm just saying, I'm being honest with you. Quitting tobacco can be a tough one. Pay attention to your diet. I'm not telling you not to eat fatty foods. I'm not a dietitian or anything like that. I'm just telling you, pay attention to your diet and exercise to stay healthy. You don't have to be Arnold Schwarzenegger or a bodybuilder, but exercise to stay healthy. A lot of hoopla about PFAS in our turnout gear. Turnout gear shouldn't be taken into the living areas of firehouses. Keep it sealed in a container if you're carrying it in your privately owned car. Apparatus cabs should be cleaned in regularly after every fire. The whole thing with the PFAS and turnout gear. I'm not going to get into that debate. A lot of people are winning lawsuits because of it. I don't think, eventually it'll make its way through the court system. The PFAS-free technologies are becoming available. Obviously, you're going to pay for it. My understanding is, when you go PFAS-free, you also give up a lot of the water repellency in our turnout gear. So you gain something but lose something. So at the end of the day, if you don't need to wear it, don't have it on. If you need to wear it, have it on. It's that simple. So this decon kit that you see here, I bought 3 of these when I was still a fire chief, and the total cost was $78 to buy 3 of these kits. Now, you don't see a bucket anywhere. Don't really need a bucket. You'll notice the garbage cans that are in here are black garbage cans. Like I said, don't use black ones, use clear ones so everybody can clearly see what's in those bags. Here's the baby wipes, the scrub brush, Dawn dish soap. And we put them in that plastic tote that you see, and they fit underneath the seat of each one of the rigs we had at the time. Again, you can get the firefighter super wipes. Huggies have larger wipes, apparently for babies that have big bottoms. Again, I would suggest stay away from anything with alcohol base in them. If you look down here, you'll see here's a 2.5 to a garden hose adapter, a nozzle, and a garden hose. All this fit in the engineer's compartment of the engine. The president of the fire company at the time wanted to know why I bought a nozzle that had 15 different power settings on it. Firefighters like to play. I figured if we give them lots of streams to play with, they'll spend extra time doing their decon. The other thing I'll advise you of is, fellas, if you're the pump operator and you're using a garden hose and you're still pumping 1 3/4 hose to fight a fire, I would suggest that you gate down that discharge, because garden hoses won't take 150 pounds of pressure from a fire pump. And if it did, I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of the water coming out of the nozzles. Does it work? The on-scene wet decon or preliminary exposure reduction reduced the contamination by 85%. That's scientific proof, not me saying that. It's the scientific community. Wash your PPE. You're looking at this, you're saying, wait a minute, that's not an extractor. That particular washing machine is probably 18 plus years old. It's a front-loaded, heavy-duty washing machine, Whirlpool type. No, I can't wash 4 or 5 sets of turnout gear at a time. When we purchased this, I talked to a guy by the name of Tom Quinn, who owned Safety Clean at the time. And he told me that this would do 99%. Now, did I ever wash stuff and have it sent off and analyzed? No. Can I tell you that the gear was clean? It was a hell of a lot cleaner when it came out than it was when it went in. When you're washing it, the inside liners need to be washed separately from the outside shells. All the D-rings snap together, all the Velcro put together. You're washing one set at a time. And then when you rinse it, I always recommend that you run it through at least 2 rinse cycles when you're done to make sure that there's no excess soap left in it, especially with the liners. Flash hoods and gloves should be washed separately from one another to avoid any kind of cross-contamination. If you have the money for an extractor, buy the extractor. If not, you can get by with something this small. And look, I happened to run at a department at the time that might have 5 or 6 working fires a year. And there was usually only 2 or 3 guys that were ultra exposed because they were the guys on the attack lines and stuff. So it's not like we needed to have a super sized extractor. And we certainly didn't have the money to have it sent out and cleaned every time it was trashed. This is a high-tech drying area that we developed. All it is a metal rack with heavy-duty hangers. The clips you see hanging here were so you could take the cuffs of the pants and hang the pants off the hangers upside down so the water would drain out the waste. Turn this fan on to the high setting, and an hour and a half later go back and everything was clean or dry and ready to be put back together. Do your apparatus checks outside. I know it's cold out now in a lot of parts of the state, or the country, but if at all possible, do your rig checks outside. Don't be sitting in the firehouse. I mean, most of us, your turnout gear is in your apparatus base. So now you're going to do apparatus checks with the diesel exhaust blasting all over the turnout gear in your apparatus base. Pull the rigs outside. Establish red, yellow, and green zones within your station, or if you want to, call them hot, warm, and cold zones. This is just an idea of how a fire station in Arlington County was laid out. Fully document all your exposures or on incident reports. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit. But if your fire department's using an incident reporting system, they're able to record you were on the incident. That incident reporting system probably doesn't record what you were exposed to because we're not collecting that data as part of that incident report. I understand that. But it shows if you ever had to file a claim that you were actually at fires where the known carcinogens were being where you were being exposed to those. 2 sets of PPE. Look, I know that there's fire departments. There's no way on God's green earth they're going to be able to buy 2 sets of turnout gear for everybody. Something that we did at the station when I was a chief was, we were fortunate on 2 different cycles that we got grants for turnout gear. The bad thing about that is you buy 20, 25 sets of turnout gear at one time, and then they all come due to be replaced at the same time. So we started to buy 2 or 3 new sets a year. So the first year, we went down our call roster. We saw who made the most calls, and of those people who made the most calls, who typically would have been part of that interior crew. And they got new sets of turnout gear. We took their old set, we had it sent out, had them cleaned and inspected, put them in totes at the firehouse, and gave them the new gear. New gear get trashed on a call, they would wash it, put on the old set that belonged to them. And we went through a cycle that every few years, for 5 or 6 years, we bought 2 or 3 new sets of turnout gear, and ultimately everybody that was active on the fire crew had 2 sets of turnout gear. There's been a lot of talk about the clean cab concept, where everything related to firefighting is removed from the cab. No portable radios, no turnout gear, no SCBA, no hand tools, none of that stuff. And everything gets moved to in a compartment. Well, unless you can retrofit your fire truck that way, that's nearly impossible. So there's an alternative. Take all that stuff out of the cab and clean it, and then decon your cabs. Clean the seat belts, clean the seats, clean the floors, wipe the walls down, wipe the ceilings down. Really give the inside of your cab a good clean. And then don't allow the contaminated stuff back in the cab after that. And if you do, know that you got to clean the cab again. In other words, keep the cabs clean on your own, and don't allow contaminated stuff back in the cab. And if you do let the contaminated stuff back in the cab, know that you got to clean those cabs again. If you have ice machines or water fountains in the apparatus bay, I suggest you remove them. I believe it was Boston went through all of their fire stations and took ice out of the ice machines and put it in a 5-gallon bucket and let it melt. And they found an oil sheen on top of the water that was in those buckets. Probably most likely from the diesel exhaust in their apparatus. If you can't afford a diesel exhaust removal system and you can't put your turnout gear in a separate room to keep it from ultraviolet light, find ways to cover it like this department did. Exposure tracking. If you do a Google search, you can find a plethora of tracking systems that you can use to personally track any of your exposures. So if you ever need to file a claim or you ever need to show something to your doctor, you've been tracking your own exposures. So we're going to move into a couple of other things here. Is your department prepared to help? So if you're a leader in your fire station and one of your firefighters, I don't care whether he's career or volunteer, comes into your office and says, "Hey, Chief, I went to the doctor today and I've been diagnosed with cancer." What's your department ready to do to help the individual? What kind of immediate support are you going to be able to offer them? Can you point them to the right medical? Can you give them some administrative help? If they're career guys, is there something, or gals, is there something you can do for duty and work adjustments? How are you going to help the families? The families are going to need some help grappling with this as well. How can you advocate on their behalf? Look, I'm going to share a story with you. We had a young man in our department several years ago. He was one of our junior firefighters. And one Monday night, we were at the station, and I said, "Are you feeling okay?" He said, "Yeah, I feel fine." I said, "Your color is bad. You really ought to go to the doctor." So his dad took him to the doctor the next day, and his family doctor immediately referred him to the hospital. And the local hospital did 3 blood tests on him because they thought they made mistakes. And after the third test, they sent it to a pediatric cancer doctor at another hospital who told him he needed to report to their hospital immediately to begin treatment. He had a form of blood cancer that typically is only seen in men 60 years and older. So this is something I discovered in our community. For the next 60 to 90 days, the entire fire service got behind this family. They all did fundraisers. They raised extra money to help with expenses, so on and so forth. I gathered my fire crew together when he was first diagnosed, and I told them that we had 90 to 120 days to take advantage of everybody else's generosity because it wouldn't last. And within about 90 days, nobody knew who he was anymore. Nobody was asking the question, "How's he doing?" All the fundraising stopped. And I'm not being critical, folks. Life goes on with people. And I understand that. But if one of your members is diagnosed with cancer, we all need to remember one thing, that we shouldn't have to fight this, that no firefighter should fight cancer alone. And I'm going to give you a contact for an organization here a little bit later called the Firefighter Cancer Support Network. A best practice: if you got lots of money and want an on-scene decon unit, you can do something like the Denver Fire Department does. A lot of the large metros have these units now, where you get clean gear issued to you while you're there. They take your dirty stuff. None of your dirty stuff ever makes it back to the station. You even have an opportunity to get personally deconned while you're there. The SCBA moved to outside compartments and not stored on the inside. The type of material on the seats in your apparatus. If you look at this material, it's like a Naugahyde leather type. It can be wiped down pretty easy. If you have cloth seats, we had a Dodge Ram 2500 and an F550 in our firehouse that had cloth seats in it. We went to Walmart and bought one of those little upholstery cleaners, and we cleaned those seats probably 10 times before we actually got clean water return in that little bubble that you could see. And then we ordered seat covers for those seats that had cloth seats. So when they got trashed, we could take them off and run them through a washing machine. And we weren't trashing the cloth seats in the apparatus anymore or cross-contaminating it. You can buy these air removal systems, these systems for your rigs now. Task Force Tip Cell is one that you can put in a rig. You can retrofit your rig. You can buy these to put in your entire firehouse that clean the air. They became a big thing during COVID with a lot of manufacturers. If you can, keep your PPE in a separate ventilated room protected from UV light. If you haven't heard, ultraviolet light will degrade the protective properties of your turnout clothing. It'll make the outside shells weaker. Exhaust removal systems for your apparatus base. And for God's sakes, if you have them, use them. NFPA 1851, the standard on selection, care, and maintenance of protective ensembles. Take your time and dive into 1851. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about all the nuances in 1851, but there are a lot of good practices in 1851 that you might be able to follow. In some cases, you may decide you can't because you can't afford to send it out to an independent service provider. I understand that. That's why it's one of those practices. If you got to have the money to do some of this stuff. I understand that, but you can still reduce the risk by taking some other steps. In May of 2024, the NFPA adopted NFPA 1585, the standard for exposure and contamination control. Another standard you can dive into. Look, I understand there are fire departments that would not be able to comply with every piece of the NFPA standard for that. But take those parts of it that you can implement, because the whole idea is to reduce your risk. So obviously, I got people on here probably from a lot of states. You need to know whether or not your state has a cancer presumption law. And you need to have someone help you research the law now, and you need to know who to call for help. I can tell you here in Pennsylvania, there's a toll-free number an individual can call to speak to an attorney in Philadelphia who's represented probably 95% of the firefighters in the state of Pennsylvania in lawsuits under the cancer presumption law. And his office will do a free consultation for Pennsylvania firefighters. I don't know what exists in other states. I know Colorado and Kansas have trust programs at the state level that have been created. So do the research on the cancer presumption laws in your individual states and do it now, and find out who you can call to get help from. Don't wait until someone shows up in your office and says, I have cancer. Now what do I do? Know ahead of time. If you're not registered in the National Firefighter Registry, and this only applies to those of you in the United States, get registered. And some people are saying, well, wait a minute, how's this whole thing work? Why do I want to share medical information with some national registry? Whether you know it or not, nearly every state in the country, if not every state in the country, already has a cancer registry. So you get diagnosed with cancer in the state you live in, and your name and the fact that you have cancer gets recorded in the state cancer registry day one. What this does is, if you register with the national registry, they share records with one another then. None of your medical information gets put in there. The fact that you were diagnosed with cancer, when you do this national registry, you're going to put in some demographic information, where you live. It took me a while to do it because I had to record all the air bases I was a firefighter on, all the volunteer fire departments I was a firefighter at, all of the instruction I did as a local level and state instructor back in the day, et cetera, et cetera. So it took me a while. But if you've been with one fire department, it doesn't take that long to register. So here's what happens. Now you get diagnosed with cancer in Pennsylvania. If you're in the national registry, those two records link up with one another. So it helps the research community going forward. It can help those people who advocate on our behalf say, hey, look, here's, or even more importantly, they start to see a cluster of the same kind of cancer in the same region of the country. Hey, wait a minute. We have this cluster of cancers in central Pennsylvania in this one little area where hundreds of firefighters have developed the same cancer. What's going on? It can help us down the road when it comes to public safety officer benefits, so on and so forth. So I'm asking you, take the time to register, and there'll be a link for this in one of the QR codes at the end of the program. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that Provident, under our accident health policy, has an optional cancer rider. Now, not every state that we do business in has been approved for the cancer rider. And if you send me an email tomorrow and say, hey, I live in XYZ state, do you have that optional cancer rider in our state? I can get you the answer. I'm not going to try to answer that state by state tonight. but you can get limits of $2,500 to $100,000 in benefit amounts. The nice thing about this rider is if you develop cancer and you're covered by that policy, it'll pay the benefit. You don't have to prove you got it being a firefighter. And the only cancer that's excluded in that policy is skin cancer, unless it's made its way into bone or tissue. It's an optional rider. Some fire departments have taken the option, others have declined it. We also have our critical illness policy that if you're diagnosed with cancer, it would pay up to $30,000 in benefit if you're diagnosed with cancer. The Firefighter Cancer Support Network. And John talked about this before we started tonight, and I may have him comment on it when we get near the end tonight. If you're diagnosed with cancer, and this is included in the links, one of the QR code links at the end of the program. You call that toll-free number and tell them you're a firefighter and you've been diagnosed with XYZ cancer. They will link you with somebody, a firefighter who's had a similar cancer, so you can talk to somebody that's been there, done that, so to speak. So you have some support. And support in this battle for cancers, very important. Several years ago, we did a webinar with women in the fire service with cancer. And the one cancer survivor we had, she was a career firefighter. Her department, all of her people gave up sick leave and sold to her, so she didn't have to burn up sick leave, or she was still able to get paid while she was laid up. Having a sense of humor, she told us having a sense of humor helped her. She was undergoing chemo and was losing her hair, so she went and bought a wig before she went to see the doctor, and she put it down in her underpants. And when the doctor was doing the exam, she said, "I don't understand this. Why do I have all this hair growth?" So she kept a sense of humor along the way, but she had a great support network. And that's what the Firefighter Cancer Support Network's all about. So this law was just passed on December the 19th of 2025. It's the Fallen Heroes Act of 2025, enacted by Congress and signed by the President, that expands benefits for volunteer and career personnel with federal death benefits, disability benefits, and educational benefits. If you're diagnosed with cancer, and I'll show you the list of cancers here shortly. If you die, there's federal death benefit. If you become disabled and can't work, there's disability benefit. And if you die, there's educational benefit there for your children and your spouse. It's a one-time tax-free lump sum payment for disability or death. There's monthly payments for educational for dependents. And these are supplemental benefits to other state, local, or pension benefits. There's no offset. If you're entitled to the benefit, regardless of what you're getting from any other form of benefit, these continue to pay. So these are the list of cancers that are presumed. If you're diagnosed with these cancers, it's presumed you got them because you're a firefighter. And obviously, and I'm not going to read them all off, and if you downloaded the PowerPoint, you'll see them yourself. Here's the list continues of the types of cancers they're talking about. If you're diagnosed with these cancers, it's presumed you got them on the job. Volunteer or career. Any form of cancer that's considered a World Trade Center related health condition is also covered under the Act. So those who may have worked at the World Trade Center as part of the cleanup or the initial response would be covered by this Act. The qualifications: being exposed to carcinogens while performing official duties, have at least 5 years of service before the diagnosis, be diagnosed with cancer within 15 years of the last active service date. So those retirees who haven't been retired 15 years yet would qualify for this benefit. The cancer must directly result in death or permanent and total disability. It's retroactive to apply to death or disability is occurring on or after January 1st of 2020. Families and disabled firefighters must file claims within 3 years of the passage of the act, which was December the 19th of 2025. So you basically have until 2028 to file claims. For older claims within 3 years of death or disability going forward. Now, I'm telling you now, you're going to end up probably having an attorney at some point. This is like any other federal PSOB benefit. The claim has to be initiated by the fire department. It's probably going to be done online, just like federal PSOB benefit is now for a line of duty death. But you know as well as I do that there are going to be claims denied, which are going to require people to lawyer up to be able to get through the appeal. And this is going to be no different than it has been with other presumption laws that have been passed in our country. And it's no different than some of the PSOB claims we have now for line of duty deaths when someone has a heart attack or a stroke. The bottom line is there's an additional protection. The time's now. There are no excuses for doing nothing. Start small and build on your successes. Start with maybe nothing more than putting baby wipes on the rigs where you don't currently carry them. Spend 70, 80 bucks and put a decon kit on one of your rigs and start doing some preliminary exposure reduction at the scene. You as an individual, quit carrying your nasty turnout gear in your car. If you were to scan this, and I'll leave it up for a minute or two, you can download this and it'll give you links to the First Responder Center for Excellence, the Firefighter Cancer Support Network, and some others. This is the healthcare providers guide I talked about. Again, if you scan this and download it, it'll give you the ability to take a printed copy of the healthcare providers guide with you to your doctors and make sure, have them put it in your medical record. My primary care physician, like I said, she had no idea that firefighters had a greater risk than the general public, and she started ordering additional blood work for me every year. I went for my physical. She retired. I got a new PCP. This healthcare thing is in my electronic record. So my new PCP was able to refer to it. The Lavender Ribbon Report that was put out by the National Volunteer Fire Council, the Volunteer Combination Officer Section at iChiefs, and some other national organizations. There's a lot of good information in that report where you can pick up on some things you could do to help yourself or your department at reducing your risk. Here's a poster that you can download that'll give you some best practices. So you could download it, print it, and hang it in the station. There's like 11 best practices listed on this poster. These are some of the sources that I got, where I got a lot of the information that I have in this presentation. And if you want to scan this again, this is the entire program that was presented tonight. And I think we'll have a separate slide that I think I put together that has the links in for the videos. So you don't have to go searching for the videos. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Sam, we're going to send that out as an extra attachment, correct?
I think so, yeah.
All right. So let's look at some of our Q&A that's in here first. John, if you want to log back in so we can see your smiling face. All right. So the first question is, do you have a cancer presumptive act in Pennsylvania? Yes, there is a cancer presumption law in PA. It was passed several years ago now. In fact, I was still the fire commissioner when it got passed, and it caused some turmoil initially in Pennsylvania. But I can tell you that a lot of that turmoil has been settled since some of the initial claims, and there have been several court cases, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled in and made things a little easier for the attorneys representing. And Robert, if you were to send me a message, if you need some assistance in talking to an attorney that can give you free counseling and let you know whether or not you would have a case under Pennsylvania cancer presumption law, I can provide you with that information. Robert Duffy, volunteers department don't have the luxury of having a second set of gear due to cost. Couldn't agree with you more. It's a struggle to do proper decon. We need to ensure we have firefighters ready to respond 24/7. Proper decon takes them out of service. It's a real struggle. Robert, I couldn't agree with you more. I will tell you, when we first started this in my own department, when I was still the fire chief at then the East Dairy Fire Company, it took us a couple of years to get in a position where we could get the active firefighters that made interior work their second set of gear. And we did it by buying a couple of sets of new gear every year rather than trying to wholesale replace everything at one time. I understand it's a struggle. It's not easy. I've been part of the volunteer fire service since I was 14 years old. I'm 66 now, so I understand that. But with a little bit of effort, you can overcome some of those struggles. How much Dawn dish soap do you use? So we had a bucket, put a couple of squirts of Dawn dish soap in, get some good soap in the bucket, and then use the scrub brush. And scrub everybody down, and then with low pressure garden hose, rinse everything off. So all you need is some soap suds in the bucket. And Dawn dish soap makes quite a bit of soap with just a little bit, so you don't have to get carried away. Can you name someone attached? This is Dale Goodrich, attached to the Fallen Firefighters Hero Act, and where to start? Dale, this law is so relatively new. I don't even think our legal community in a lot of places yet knows what to do. And I don't, to be honest with you, I don't even know if the Department of Justice has even had time to put rules and regulations out on it at this point. But I will do this for you, Dale. You'll have my email address tomorrow. If you email me and ask me the same question, I'll go to an attorney friend of mine and ask him the same question. Just let me know what state you're from, and I'll get you an answer or attempt to get you an answer. Dave Roberts asked a question: any similar studies that address cancer amongst public sector fire investigators? We did a webinar last year, and the guy's name's going to escape me right now, who's a fire investigator, and he had results from those studies. Dave, I'm going to ask you if you can, Sam, drop my email address in these questions and answers. So
Yeah,
these
I
guys
will.
can, all right. So they, yeah. So
Are
they
you
can,
thinking of PPE for the Mind, Ed? The
what's
one we
that?
did in October?
Say it again, Sam.
PPE for the Mind, the essential gear,
No, that was remember the arson investigator we did the one with the fire's out. So now what was the
Uh,
title of it?
I'm looking. Fire Chief Burnout, 18 structure fire watch out situations.
It was before those. I think it was
Oh,
titled,
yep.
yeah, the fire's out. Now
With
what?
Jeff Pauley.
Yeah, Jeff Pauley.
Okay. I can link that video in this message as well, so
Okay.
you to your
All
email.
right, if you can do that. And
Yep.
Dave, again, you'll have my email address tomorrow at some point. If you drop me an email, I'll dig into this a little further with that to get you a specific answer to that question. I know there have been studies done, and I know their recommendations are you should be using an APR filter mask, wear and turnout clothing, so on and so forth. But I know there have been studies done. And I think that takes care of everything under Q&A. Let's see what might be popping up in the chat.
We
And
just
while you're
covered.
looking there, I was just going to bring up, and again, I understand money is an issue, but in my current hazmat team and in my home department, the use of the washing machines doubled and tripled the day we got dryers. Because, as firefighters, we are afraid to miss a call. So if we can hurry up and wash our gear and get it dried, they're more apt to use it.
So someone posted in during COVID, we were very diligent with backpack sprayers and decon rigs. Would you recommend starting that again in conjunction with decon? Look, if it's cleaning the cab of your rig, I don't have an issue with that. Someone asked Stan Jones thoughts on Simple Green. The only thing I'll tell you about Simple Green is cut it back with water, mix it with water in a jug, because if you use Simple Green straight up, it has a tendency to leave a sticky surface. It makes the surface kind of sticky. So, and someone commented Jeff Pauley's the one that did yeah, here you go. Sam put it in. The fire's out. Provident webinar with Jeff Pauley. There's my email address.
Ed, there's a question from Michael Reddy. During COVID, we were very diligent with backpack sprayers to decon rigs. Would you recommend starting that again in
And
conjunction
yeah,
with decon?
and my answer is that if it helped you decon the rigs then, and you can use it effectively to use it for decontamination with the things that we're exposed to in the fireground, I wouldn't have an issue with it. But I'm not a technical expert with the backpack sprayer. So talk to the people that you bought the backpack sprayers from. I don't recommend soaking everything in the cab of your fire truck. I mean, a lot of times it's just a matter of wiping things down real good. Okay. Let me see. John, will you mention again? I mentioned it during the Firefighter Cancer Support Network. Will you tell the folks about the phone call you made and what's happened with you so far through them?
First, let me just say that being alone is horrible, and the more support you can get, the better off you're going to be. Ed hooked me up with this group, and within 12 hours of me making a phone call, I was contacted by them. They sent me a kit with how to organize everything that I was going through, and they found someone in their network that had the same type of cancers I did. And within a week, he called me, and it was reassuring to speak to someone who had survived everything. It was a godsend, honestly. And he provided me his number so I can reach out to him anytime I'm feeling down or have questions.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Dave Rucker made a comment. I'm in a volunteer department. Personal clothing shouldn't be washed in the same washers. I agree. I agree. If you're using a front loaded machine like I showed you in the video to wash turnout gear, you shouldn't be washing your personal clothes in it. I couldn't agree more. Again, because of cross contamination. All right, I don't see anything else in the chat. I don't see anything else in the Q&A. So, John, before I go into our closing comments tonight, Do you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom for our listeners?
Honestly, be your advocate. And you know yourself, how you feel, you know if something's not right, run at the ground until you're happy that you've done everything you can. You have one life, there's no coming back from it. So again, if we're leaning ahead and doing all the cancer risk reductions, and we're still not feeling right, please keep elevating your search until you find somebody that's willing to listen to you.
Okay. So you'll get all these links tomorrow. You'll still be able to scan these things. If you have any issues getting access, especially to the videos I showed tonight, let us know and I'll send you the actual links to them again. I want to remind our audience there'll be a brief survey we would like you to complete. Keep an eye on your email from me that'll have your certificate attached to it for tonight's webinar. Again, tonight's episode will be uploaded to providentins.com and you'll receive a link to that in an email within the next day. Please make sure you check your spam or junk mail before sending me an email saying, I don't have my certificate. For those of you who use the webinar as training for a group of people, when you receive the thank you email from joining us from Sam, there'll be an Excel spreadsheet attached. Please use this to send the names and email addresses to us for certificates. It makes my life a whole lot easier when you do it on a spreadsheet. You can view previous webinars at www.providentins.com and use the training resources link in the upper right-hand corner of that page. Join us on February 25th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time when Chief Spencer Cheatham of the West Point Volunteer Fire Department, a combination department, Virginia, will present Triggers, Traps, and Triumphs, transitioning from an all-volunteer to a combination fire department. Until we meet again, stay safe for your family's sake.